Hello, fellow saints. Brian here. Just wanted to get into this will be part 11 of the Churchanity series, covering mostly the lesson 11 in the book, the Church of the Bible that we're covering. First, a couple of thoughts that as I was kind of going through this, a couple of thoughts came to mind that now we're kind of moving into more of the what he calls the church at work, or basically the work of the church, what we could say, right? And so we're getting into kind of what the what the New Testament talks about as primary functions of the church or the assembly. Okay, so but in thinking about that, it kind of dawned on me too that we got to think of, when we look at the kind of a general thought was that the world is self-seeking. Okay. And then I thought, so the world's self-seeking, the church needs to be the opposite of that. So I would say, while the world is self-seeking, the church is soul-seeking. Okay, and then part of that too, when we say, obviously that entails, focused on the gospel and salvation unto the unsaved world. That's a big part of soul-seeking. But also in conjunction with that is as we'll get into, but also the physical needs of the people, of the whether it's poor, widows, infants, and children, that aspect, just taking care of, and just being in general, just being an extension of Messiah and the Father to the world, to be the light of the world, as we're told in Scripture, to prove that He loved us through our love for others in general in the world, and even we're even told to pray for our enemies. And so again, we have this distinction versus the world it's all about I'm getting mine, that self-seeking mentality, and very self-centered. And the church, we as believers, we have to be the opposite of that and stuff as we kind of go through this. So keep that in mind. Also, as we go through this, another thing to think about is, do we truly believe that God provides? It's something else that, as I was kind of going through this, it's like, do we really have faith that God provides? And as like I said, we'll go through some more of this, but do we really believe that deep in our heart? And also, part of that is we are asked to provide, to be that example unto others and to the world, and yes, even our enemies. We're told if your enemy hungers, to feed them. And so so in a lot of ways, while we should have faith that God provides for us, through faith as well, we provide to others. And so it's really it is kind of a dual relationship there between we need to be the example unto others, to give, and with that, when we have true faith that God provides for our needs, it makes it a lot easier to be willing and able, and even excited about providing for others. And so to me, it kind of goes hand in hand. When it's easy to say that we have faith, and we have faith that God provides, but do our deeds and works, do they prove that out or not? And I think most people would probably, be a little guilty upon this, even myself included, that we don't provide and we don't give enough to others and to strangers and stuff. So, there's just a couple of thoughts. As we get into this now, we're going to start talking about one of the primary functions of the New Testament church was edifying and building up the saints. So building up each other within the congregation, the church. Okay, so that's a big part of this. And of course, there's also the spiritual needs of the assembly of believers as well, of the saints. So providing, for that whole edification, spiritual needs, and then also the physical needs as well is a big part of the Testament church. Was talking about trying to, they were getting resources together. They were taking, supplies and stuff, where it was needed and things. So we'll get into that. Okay, so in the going into lesson 11 here, talks about here on the first Pentecost after the resurrection of Christ, after Peter had told the people to repent and be baptized, and exhorted them, saying, "Save yourselves from this crooked generation." That's in Acts 2:40. We are told they then that received his word were baptized, and they were added unto them that day about 3,000 souls. This was the beginning of the church. These people who accepted the gospel were called out of their sinful ways of living to follow the way of holiness. They were redeemed, purified, sanctified, and reconciled to God. They made up the ecclesia, the assembly, the church. Therefore, the activities in which they engaged and the work which they accomplished were the activities and the work of the church. Okay, so beginning the very first verse, we have a description of some of these activities, and they continue steadfastly in the apostles' teaching and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and the prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things common, and they sold their possessions and goods and parted them to all, according as man had need. And day by day, continuing steadfastly with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread at home, they took their food with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God and having favor with all of the people. And then, so here we have a brief mention of the miracles of the apostles, the faithfulness in living and worship by the disciples, and their generosity in helping those among them who were in need. This personal interest and helpfulness is further expressed in these words. And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and soul. And not one of them said that aught of the things which he possessed was his own. But they had all things common, for neither was there among them any that lacked. For as many as were possessors of lands or houses sold them, and brought the prices of things that were sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet. And distribution was made unto each according as anyone had need. Among others, we are told that Barnabas, having a field, sold it, and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. That's Acts 4:37. These statements show that the distribution of these funds were entrusted to the apostles, which suggests personal helpfulness rather than personal self-seeking. It is also evident from the case of Ananias that the gifts to provide for those who were in need were not commanded, but voluntary. They gave because they loved one another and wanted to give. While it remained, did it not remain thy own? And after it was sold, was it not in thy power? How is it that thou hast conceived this thing in thy heart? Thou hast not lied unto men, but unto God. Acts 5:4. And of course we know that Ananias and his wife both died, and they gave up their spirit once it was found out that they had lied in this horrific act. It's almost like he was Peter saying, like, look, this was in, you had the land, you had the money. Why would you come and lie and say this is everything that we own? Like, why would you even come and do that type of thing? To say that, basically they lied and said how much they sold their land and stuff for, and it was not true. So, so they definitely, like I say, they lied to God. Not it wasn't about lying to Peter and stuff. They thought they could conceal it, and have they wanted both. Basically, they wanted to be a part of the assembly, but they also wanted to keep their stuff of the world, right? So this, I think it reminds me back of Lot's wife, looking back on Sodom and Gomorrah, and then she turns into a pillar of salt, right? And so it's kind of similar where your heart lies. That's where you're, and wherever your heart lies again. So same thing with Lot's wife. So similar thing from that. So very, very thing. This is kind of why I say, do we truly, deep down, do we truly believe that God will provide? And I think that's something that will challenge all of us to ponder and to think on and to pray about and stuff too. Do we truly believe God provides? I think in this world, we're so built on things of the world and of money and possessions and all that, especially in the West, that it's something that we all need to pray about, and to be able to let these things go on a dime if it means Especially if it means that, or forsaking the Messiah and the Father, which as things get tighter, all around the world, as we see more and more governments, rising up and trying to demand more and more control and more power, things are going to get probably much worse. And eventually, you're probably not going to have. Most people aren't going to have a choice. Okay, I mean, your choice is going to be: do you continue in the faith, or do you bend the knee to local governments and tyrants? And so, that's the thing. And we're seeing that now with the so-called COVID vaccine. I know this is a little off topic, but we're seeing this with the so-called vaccine, which is really not a vaccine. It's really a inoculation and stuff. So we're really seeing a separation between, those that willingly, bend the knee towards, so-called, government, control and stuff without even questioning, what's in the syringe and stuff. So, it's very dangerous. People don't even ask questions, and then they just rely on what the big government and the big corporations are telling them, that are all, they're all tied together. And so, but I won't get too much into that. We're getting off topic, but so let's get back into this here. And then it talks about in the beginning of that very next verse, we have a description of some of these activities. And so they continued steadfastly in the apostles' teaching and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and the prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And he talks about here, and they sold their possessions, and he mentioned that again, and he parted with them according as anyone had need. This personal interest and helpfulness is further expressed in these words: and the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and one soul. And not one of them said that aught of the things they possessed was his own, but they all had things common. So that means they, and none had lack, right? So that they didn't lack anything. And when I had read this, I went back into the book of Acts and read this too, and my heart really leapt out when I read that, and it even got a little teary-eyed just hearing the fact that they were of one heart and one soul. That's just very powerful. That's a very powerful thing, and I can't say that I've ever experienced that in terms of a congregation, a church. I really haven't. I've never experienced that, and so that would be the goal. That's what it should be, though. So this is giving you an example of what the true assembly really should be. So it's not just a congregation of separate families, all, and the people are in their different cliques and things like that. It's supposed to be all in one accord, all with one heart and one mind and one. They're all shooting for the same goals of sharing the gospel, sharing stories and testimonies, and edifying one another. That's what it really should be. And so that's kind of what the picture I want to make sure you have is. That's what the true church should look like. Okay, and so he talks about the statement show that the distribution of these funds were entrusted to the apostles, and he kind of goes into just trying to distinguish that. Look, while it's true, while the apostles did manage, they did help facilitate a lot of that in the beginning. At some point it got it really got too much as the assembly grew. More and more, and of course there's different locations. You got Ephesus and Antioch and all these other places. As it spread, they really couldn't do it all. They couldn't do it all themselves. So then at one point in the book of Acts, they actually appoint more people, and so it does say to appoint more people to in this work. And then the apostles did lay hands on those people and pray for them and bless them in that work. And so there was there's a kind of a fine line between something that's disorganized, and so we definitely don't want we definitely don't want disorganization. Okay, it's something that stuff like this, it should be organized, but it also doesn't mean we have to go into a full-out ecclesiastical control. Like there's just some kind of there's a tyrant at the top type of thing. That's the world's way. We've already talked about that in this series, but and so he goes into a little bit of that too. So I'll try not to focus too much on that, just since we've covered it so much already. But he does kind of distinguish that that look, they didn't really have, there wasn't like a full control. They just, they were just trying to help, make sure help got to the needy, which is part of the calling of the church. And so if the apostles didn't do that, then they themselves, how could they say they were doing what was Christ-like, and how would they be an example unto the rest of the church? So they had to do, to not do the work is what I'm saying. You would not have been a Christian, okay, at that time. You wouldn't have been a believer or a part of the church if you didn't do the work. So that, they have to be, they have to do it, and to be an example. And then whenever things got too big, then they would find, other like-minded believers that, that were honorable within the assemblies and different areas, and they would appoint them to help in those works and ordain them, which just means pray for them and anoint them basically for that activity. So just keeping it pretty simple. Again, we got to stop. We don't want to think about it in terms of some kind of a position of honor in terms of the worldly way. There's no badge included, right? There's no sheriff badge or something like that, or here's your license or certificate or whatever. There's nothing like that in the world. There's not going to get any kind of Nobel Prize, right, or anything for this. This is part of being a church, but you're just saying we're going to ordain you in this work for whatever it is. But in this case, for helping distribute food and resources to the ecclesia in need in different areas and stuff. Okay. That's some of the big points there. Was definitely, like I said, edifying, people, their physical needs and stuff, and and I will say too, I've been challenged over the years in reading when it talks about when they sold all their possessions and all that, and I've kind of it's really challenged me to and stuff over the years to see. So, but there is a balance, I think, between that and also we're also told if you don't provide for your own family, then you're worse than an unbeliever. So there's always seemed like there's a balance between those two things, to where so for example, if one person forsakes their job and things like that, if they forsake it for the right reasons, they forsake it for pursuit of Messiah and those things, I think that's honorable. But in hindsight, though, too, if they do such a thing and thinking that they're not going to have to work and all those kind of things to provide for if they've got a wife and kids at home, then that's very dishonorable. So such activities can really quickly become dishonorable if now that person just thinks they can just sit around and not actually not work at all, or they don't think they can, they're not going to feed their family and let their family starve, not provide clothing and things like that, basic needs. Then that's another story. Now we're getting into dishonorable actions, and someone that's kind of slothfulness and become lazy. And stuff. So I think there's a real balance there between those two, and looking and reading through this too, it makes me realize how much support the local assembly actually had, and they were so they had such power with the Holy Spirit among them that, like I said, they were of one heart and one soul. So I've never seen that kind of support, and so because of that, it makes it really hard to, I think, give up the things of the world. It makes it harder because we don't have that support. We don't have that. We don't have that the New Testament church mentality these days, sadly, which is what I'm hoping is going to resurface now and stuff. And as it does, the support of each other and of the brother and sisterhood, that support will come with it. Okay, that's what should happen, and this should come with it. And with that, it's going to make it easier for people to say, okay, I can't work that job anymore because now they're requiring this or that or whatever it is. As things get more and more tyrannical and more communistic around the world, as that grows, the more tyranny will come out of it, more tyranny and more violence, more trying to force you to do stuff, and trying to replace your God-given freedoms and stuff. So we're going to see that more, and especially when it comes to, obviously they've always attacked the church in general, has always been attacked throughout history. They will attack, God and Christ. That's number one enemy, obviously, of Satan. So he will come after the believers of the church, and we will see that definitely in these last days as well. So, okay. All right. So next, I wanted to talk about. There was a good one in here. Let's see what page was that. So I'm kind of skipping some of this just so it didn't make it too long. It talks about be the light of the world. I talked a little bit about that. Yeah, he talks about too. It says that the thought of as the work of it's individual Christians. He talks about how it's not, that yes, this is all individual. It's individual Christians, but they all have, it's also one in accord with the church. So it's saying it's not it goes back to it's not the church dictating, everything that has to happen exactly, to a T and setting all these rules and regulations up. It's not that type of thing, but it's individual. It's all Christians within the community, all acting, doing their thing, whether it's preaching the gospel, giving, helping each other, edifying one another, all these things. These are all individual Christian actions, but they also are all doing it in one accord. Okay, so it's both. It's not just this is a dictated from the elders down. It was everybody. So and stuff. So let's see. I'll go one. There was another good point I wanted to mention. On 147, religious ritual versus Christian living. So in this, he's kind of talking about, sadly, so talking about there was total neglect sometimes of the personal spiritual problems of weak, struggling individuals, or the unchristlike attitudes that pervade certain segments of the congregation that have destroyed its unity, handicapped its progress, and stifled its spiritual influence. How could they so ignore the statement made by Paul, by Paul to the elders of the church at Ephesus? In all things I gave you an example, that so laboring, ye ought to help the weak, and to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Okay? So there we have also another example of giving being of most importance. So, my brethren, if any among you err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he who converteth a sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall cover a multitude of sins. James 5:19 through 20. And so, and then he talks about here too, it's like sadly, there's a lot of times they have, the church has given so little attention to the spiritual needs of the flock and stuff. So sadly, not only do we have the situation where the physical needs are not being met in the modern church, but also the spiritual needs a lot of times aren't being met either. There may not be a call out to sins, for example, and stuff, and then they're not. It's kind of hard. You can't really mimic the New Testament church whenever you have that organization like that, where you have a pastor up on a pedestal, sometimes literally, or a podium type of thing. And, a lot of times they put them up on a stage, right? They're up on a stage, they've got a podium and all this kind of stuff. You're already singling somebody out and putting them on a pedestal within that congregation. And this is why, I mentioned before about, I think it's very important to, have the true church should have also times where people, they would share stories together and, amongst themselves, of course, and things that's happened, or maybe they've had dreams or visions, they've had prophecies, what miracles that's happened in their life and stuff. So you would share these, but they would share it with the whole congregation, okay, and stuff. So whether that was actually in a public venue somewhere, or someone's house, or whatever, but they would all share amongst each other. So it wouldn't just be one person. Now you might have one person read scriptures or whatever, and you could rotate, but it's I think it's dangerous when you start putting one person on a pedestal and expecting them to dictate everything and stuff. So that's kind of the way of the world, to have to promote a CEO or a president of a company or whatever. That's kind of the way of the world when they want to prop up one king, for example, and stuff. So that won't be this. It wouldn't be the same thing in the church. It should be, while they're still honored, people are honored that have experience and have been, they can be labeled an elder, but you got to watch that, because it can become corrupted really quickly. So, and he talks about here that sometimes we have been completely forgetful of the fact that one must have the Spirit of Christ to be his, as in Romans 8:9, and only those who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God, Romans 8:14. So how did the Christians of the first century accomplish the work of helping one another in their love for God and their spiritual needs unto edifying? Were they not truly their brother's keeper? Which that goes back into Cain and Abel, talking about, I'm not my brother's keeper. And it's like, well, yes, you are, based on what God's laws and to love thy neighbor, even more so for someone that's your kin. To not be so is very disrespectful and not following God's commands. Okay, and so we are, we should be our brother's keeper if we are truly filled with the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Christ. Okay, and so. I am skipping a lot of stuff in here that was, there's some really good information on that, lesson 11. So I do recommend reading through it, just because some of it was kind of repetitive. I'm trying to give you the whole idea of it, without having to read a ton of it. But it says here, but if any provideth not for his own, and especially his own household, he have denied the faith, and is worse than an unbeliever. 1 Timothy 5:8 and stuff. So again, it just talks about that. And remember I mentioned widows, honoring widows and infants and the poor. I mean, that's all throughout Scripture, and that's Old Testament and New Testament on that. So those are highly encouraged, and it's part of faith. The part of the faith. It's just part of it. It should be a part of it. And I think, some modern churches, try to do some of this through organizational giving or they do some fundraising things here and there. And I think, but oftentimes it's kind of, so like organized, and it's, they may try to work through other agencies, and, it's just, I think it becomes kind of watered down, if you will. And not sure it doesn't really have the same effect, but it does kind of remind me too. I have seen pictures over the years where you'll have a picture of a nonprofit meal, like for like a Thanksgiving meal, let's say, or like a Christmas meal, or something like Christmas or Thanksgiving. And like you would see the Red Cross, for example, and it would be kind of a lame. Looked like a kind of a frozen meal type of thing, with like a pretty lame looking piece of turkey, and you can tell it's processed type of food, and it's like perfect, ice cream scooper used for the mashed potatoes and things like that, and dressing is very mechanical. Okay, and then you see next to that picture of the Red Cross version of a meal, you would see one provided by a local church, and it's like heaping over with homemade mashed potatoes and gravy, and you can tell it's like homemade, turkey, and it's like basically the plate's like just mounting over, like, and so you see the example of something made with love and care, and then something made by an organization, and that's the same. To me, that's a great visual of what we see when we have a modern assembly model of a church as well, versus even or even a company or a nonprofit versus a loving provider like a church should be. Okay, so I think it's a good visual of that, of kind of the realities of it. While you could say, someone could say, well, they're Red Cross is still helping people. At least they're not starving to death. True. So there's some value in it, but is it the same? Or can we also say that those are equal? Not really. I mean, one's had much more love and care in it, and stuff than the other. One took more time and preparations for reading it. One's based on, and also one's based on what? One's based on quantity, and the other's based on quality. So the true church will focus on the quality of the relationship amongst each other, the brethren and the sisters within the congregation and those outside. But they will focus on the quality of relationship and building that and edifying one another and building each other up. Then it's not going to be a mechanical chop shop of trying to, I try to think of like an assembly belt, like an assembly belt coming down where you have that little scooper and you're plopping down mashed potatoes in a little ice cream scooper. That mentality, again, that's the world. It's all about quantity, okay? And the true church, though, is about quality and stuff too. So that's a really big important point to make. So, but that's kind of the recap on that lesson 11. So I think we got a few more chapters to cover, and then this book, this series and stuff will be closed out here soon, maybe the next week or so. We'll see when I can get to all of it. And otherwise, stay blessed in Messiah, and talk to you soon.